Welcome into America's Voice News. This is The Road Forward. Today, a critical discussion on abortion and the pro-life movement. As always, a word of hope and encouragement for you and those you love, especially in these difficult times. I'm Dr. Tim Clinton, President of the American Association of Christian Counselors and Executive Director of the James Dobson Family Institute. I'll be your host. Our special guest joining us, founder and chairman of the Faith and Freedom Coalition, Ralph Reed, the president and founder of Faith to Action and author, leader of the Heartbeat pro-life bill, Janet Porter, former professional baseball player, nationally recognized entrepreneur and business owner, best-selling author and activist, David Benham, and president of Choose Grace International, Kayleen Carlson. Back this week is Battle Cry podcaster and my son, Zach Clinton, with his special guest, Victoria Robinson. You don't want to miss it. Also, my friend and recording artist, Michael O'Brien. He'll keep our hearts and minds centered on Christ.
Oh, I see myself, but it's hard for me to see when held you on the cross, when you could have walked away and say what you've done, and I just have to say, when held you on the cross.
Pandemic, racial tensions, rioting, looting, violence, the online insanity. It seems to only be getting more and more intense. Let's stand united in prayer for our great country. A big-time issue in the upcoming election is the issue of abortion and the Supreme Court appointments. Some are saying it is the issue that will drive evangelicals, especially evangelical women, to the polls to vote. Where are most Americans on partial birth abortion? Is it acceptable to take the life of a baby right at almost birth? It's hard to believe that we're even talking about this. Psalm 139, verses 13 and 14 says this, "For you formed my inward parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, God, and my soul knows it very well." Strap in. We're going to jump headfirst into this issue. But let me say this. We'd love to hear from you. Would you let us know where you're watching from right now? Type in. Let us know where you're watching from. And please like and share this program with your friends. It's amazing what God is doing with this program, The Road Forward. Let's pray, and we'll get started. God be with us, especially as we jump into this topic of abortion. God, guide our thoughts, our minds, and Lord, we pray for our country right now. God, do what only you can do. We ask all this. In the strong name of Jesus, I pray. Amen. Let's get started.
Strength arises, we wait upon the Lord. Wait upon the Lord, we will wait upon the Lord. Strength arises, we wait upon the Lord. Wait upon the Lord, we will wait upon the Lord our God. He reigns forever. Our hope, our strong You are the everlasting God, everlasting God.
Joining us now is Ralph Reed. He's the founder and chairman of the Faith and Freedom Coalition. He's also chairman and CEO of Century Strategies, and he's the author and editor of 7 best-selling books. It's always fun to have him. Ralph, welcome back.
Thanks so much, Tim. Good to be back with you.
Ralph, as we get started, and there are a lot of big issues coming up this fall. Everybody's all over the place, a lot of tension. One of those issues that's always been there when it comes to an election, that's the issue of abortion. Some are saying, Ralph, it's the biggest issue. What's your take on all of that?
I think for many voters of faith, it is, in the sense that, they may not tell pollsters that it's the most important issue to them. They might say economy or jobs or education. But I think it is a red line in terms of qualifying or disqualifying candidates. And I think particularly in the case of President Trump in 2016, where you had a Supreme Court vacancy on election day that would decide the ideological balance of the court. Tim, the fact that the president was unapologetically pro-life as a candidate made it clear that he had had a change of heart on this issue. I think that change of heart was genuine, but regardless of what your view on that is, he was pro-life and is pro-life, and pledged to appoint pro-life judges. And he has done so. He's kept his word. And on top of that, he became the first president of the United States since Roe v. Wade to appear in person and address the March for Life. And he said many important things in that speech, Tim, but I think the most important of which I thought, and the greatest truth of many that he said, is, and I'm paraphrasing, they're after me because I'm defending you. And I think that's right. I think he's been a champion for life. He's been a champion for the pro-life community. And the other side is not happy about it.
Ralph, if you go back, early on when there were some talks about religious liberty, and Little Sisters of the Poor wound up on stage with the president and more. It goes back to the Obamacare effort and what was being sort of placed on these organizations, infringed upon them. And Dr. James Dobson, others, were challenged by this work. Ralph, that ignited, I think, a firestorm, and then you start going through all this journey in this battle over abortion, this contemporary journey. And can you even believe we're having discussions like the governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, and talking about believing that abortion was acceptable right up to the birth canal and more? Well, some are saying even outside the womb. I can't even believe we're talking about that stuff right now.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. And to have a professing faithful Catholic, a man who says that he is a devoted Roman Catholic, who has signed on to a platform that calls for abortion on demand up to the moment of birth, up to moments before birth, paid for with our tax dollars, and included as an entitlement under government-run healthcare modeled on Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All. That's what Joe Biden's calling for. Now, this is a man who for 42 years, as a U.S. Senator, as Vice President, and as a three-time presidential candidate, supported the Hyde Amendment, which has been the law in this country, Tim, since 1977. So for a period of 43 years, it has been a bipartisan consensus in the United States that we do not use tax dollars to perform elective abortions under Medicaid because so many of our citizens believe that it's the taking of an innocent human life. Joe Biden, when he got into this race, he flip-flopped on that issue and folded like a cheap suit to the demands of Planned Parenthood. And so I think on the life issue, the case has never been more stark. And you alluded to the Little Sisters of the Poor. Remember, the Hobby Lobby case was decided 5-4. It was decided by one vote that Hobby Lobby, as a closely held Christian business, would not be forced to pay for medical services that took innocent human life. Little Sisters of the Poor was decided 7-2 because of Donald Trump's court appointments and because of the move of that court. Joe Biden said on the day that the Little Sisters of the Poor, who were threatened with fines totaling $70 million by the Obama-Biden administration, and who were dragged into federal court by Biden's administration, he said on the day they won their case that if he became president, he would seek to reimpose those mandates on them and sue them again. That tells you how stark the contrast really is.
Ralph, Planned Parenthood often comes into the discussion when we talk about abortion in our country. Tell us a little bit about what's happening with Planned Parenthood, where both sides are as they approach the election.
Well, Planned Parenthood at this point, candidly, is essentially a political operation. They endorsed Hillary Clinton in the primaries 4 years ago, first time they had ever done that. They've endorsed Joe Biden. They're spending tens of millions of dollars to try and mobilize and turn out pro-abortion voters. I think their emphasis on women's health has taken a back seat to their political public policy pro-abortion agenda. And make no mistake about it, if Joe Biden were to become president, he would be beholden to the union bosses, the squad, Bernie Sanders, and Planned Parenthood. Whatever his personal views, he would owe them. That is one choice. The other choice is Donald Trump, the most pro-life president of our lifetimes, a man who spoke at March for Life, who expanded the Mexico City policy, who has stood up for religious freedom, and has defunded Planned Parenthood under the Title X program. It's as stark a choice, Tim, as we have ever faced as a nation when it comes to life.
Ralph, since Roe versus Wade, the pro-life movement has journeyed, and they're making progress. Most Americans want some type of limitation on abortion. I just can't understand why the extreme now, Ralph, and close this up here. Why the extreme? Why are they pushing to the nth degree here? Why is it like, why are they going to fall on their sword over this issue? And what about people standing up and having a voice and saying something now for such a time as this? Everything's on the table, Ralph.
Everything's on the line. We had a decision just this past session of the Supreme Court involving a Louisiana clinic regulation bill that was decided adversely against us 5-4. So John Roberts, who had previously voted for a similar clinic regulation in Texas, voted against this one. So he flip-flopped his votes. Won't get into the details of that, but he argued it was because of precedent. But the point is, we're on the knife's edge right now as to whether or not our country, our courts, and our government are going to stand to protect the unborn or not. And whoever's elected president on November 3rd is going to appoint at least one and maybe as many as 3 Supreme Court justices. If you want to know, Tim, why they won't give an inch, that's why. Their victories have been achieved not in legislative chambers, not in the court of public opinion. They've been losing in public opinion. They've been losing at the grassroots, and they've been losing in state legislatures and Congress. They don't have a single major legislative victory since Roe v. Wade. They rely on the courts. And if they lose the courts, they lose it all. That's why they don't give an inch. That's why we have to pray harder and work harder than we ever had and turn out the biggest pro-life vote of faithful Roman Catholics and evangelicals in American history in roughly the next 55 days.
Ralph Reed, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Coming up next, the president and founder of Faith to Action and the author, a leader of the Heartbeat pro-life bill, Janet Porter.
Our God is alive, the lion true. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles. Every knee will bow before him. Our God is there, the Lamb that was slain for the sin of the world. Whose blood makes us take. Every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Every knee will bow before.
Joining us now is Janet Porter. She's the president and founder of Faith to Action, a pro-life network for the family. Janet initiated the nation's first heartbeat bill in Ohio. The goal was to legally protect preborn babies with detectable heartbeats. Janet has authored 5 books, including her latest, A Heartbeat Away. Janet, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, as we get started, since Roe versus Wade, January 22, 1973, an estimated 60-plus million abortions in our country, about 1.5 million annually. It's certainly a topic that is often discussed around the dinner table, but man, is it front and center in our country, especially right now as we head into the election. I saw recently that the Guttmacher Institute estimated about 40+% of American women under the age of 45 have had an abortion. That's a lot of women. And so this is touching lives personally. It's also a highly charged political issue. What are your thoughts on where we're at right now?
Well, you made it very clear. We have never been in a place where the choice is more clear, where we have a choice of life or we have a choice of death. This is the most critical issue in our country because upon which life is the issue upon which every other issue is based. You know, what good is free healthcare if you're dead? Life is what matters. Is our first right. And there's no question where the candidates stand on this. President Trump has made promises. He's kept promises. He's put pro-lifers on the courts, on the Supreme Court. He has issued pro-life policy. And then we look at the Biden-Harris ticket, and we're looking at people, the most rabidly pro-abortion choice that our nation could make. I mean, we're looking at paid for. What would happen is we'd have to pay for abortion through birth up until that child's first gasp of breath at birth. I mean, it doesn't get any more clear than that. The choice is life or death. And we're, of course, encouraging people to choose life.
You know, Janet, we've been talking inside of Christianity about abortion for a long time. Dr. Dobson, a host of others have helped lead the way. You've been right in the middle of the thick of all that. And the pro-life movement has been making a lot of gains. I want to talk a little bit about them just for a moment so our viewers catch the spirit of where we're going here just for a moment. And then we'll talk a lot about the candidates and where they're at. Janet, in terms of abortion clinics, I saw back a few years ago there were about nearly 2,000 of them or so in the country. That number has been reduced significantly because of pro-life efforts. I mean, it's down into the hundreds, is what I'm told. That's a pretty big deal. And a lot of what's going on now is legislatively oriented, right? A lot of people are working at the state level, trying to deal with abortion through the legal process, and we're making gains there. Can you update us?
Sure. Let me just tell you from personal experience, we have seen a more advancement in the pro-life cause, even just last year, than we've seen in 47 years leading up to this. There are 6 heartbeat bills that passed in the first 5 months of 2019. And then we've seen another one pass this year in Tennessee. So there have been 10 heartbeat bills in all. And what those bills say that if a heartbeat is detected, the baby is protected. It will protect nearly every child facing an abortion. And since we first introduced this bill a decade ago, there have been 29 states that have introduced this. Alabama had a full protection from conception. We have never seen the advancements in this arena like we have in the last few years. It is encouraging. It is hopeful. But one thing we've learned by the latest Supreme Court rulings is that we need some more justices on the Supreme Court. And that's why we need President Trump around to make those appointments. If we want our laws to be upheld, we need a court that's going to do it, and we need judges that are pro-life. You know, I've been in this movement, as you said, a long time. It used to be that a lot of legislators, a lot of the people running for president would play a lot of games. We'll put people on the court that will interpret the Constitution, and they'll be concerned. No. What President Trump has done, he's come right out and said it. My litmus test is you have to be pro-life. And it's just so refreshing. You know, you may not like that he's a little rough around the edges, but I love that he is direct. He is to the point. You can count on what he says, because what he says is even more importantly is what he does. And he backs up what he says with his actions.
Yeah, they're saying that this next election whoever's elected president may appoint 2, maybe even 3 more justices to the court. That's a big deal. We're talking about generational impact here, aren't we?
Yes, we are. You know, I saw a Facebook post the other day, and it said, well, President Trump talked about defunding Planned Parenthood. How come he hasn't done it in the last 4 years? Well, the answer to that question is that it's Congress that holds the purse strings. But you know what I love about President Trump? He doesn't do things the ordinary way, the orthodox way, waiting on Congress to do what they promise and don't keep their promises. What he did is he changed the rules of Title X and said, hey, Planned Parenthood, if you want $60 million, then you've got to itemize what is legitimate health care from what is abortion. And guess what? Planned Parenthood said no. They literally turned down 60 million of our tax dollars rather than specify what they do with it. Because why? Because their legitimate health care is really just a smokescreen for what they really do, and that is kill babies. And they're doing it with our tax dollars in other ways. But it's the president that found a way to defund them when Congress wouldn't do it. It's the president that's put pro-life judges on the court. It's the president. This president's the only one that ever spoke at the pro-life march. In fact, that's why I dedicated my book to him. It is a quote from his speech at the pro-life march. He said this: unborn children have never had a stronger defender in the White House. Very, very true. He said this: They are coming after me because I am fighting for you. And we are fighting for those who have no voice. And we will win because we know how to win. And I would submit to the president that heartbeat bills are the way to win, because when we took a national poll, we found that this bill that will keep hearts beating, had the support of America. 7 out of 10 favored this bill. 86% of Republicans, according to a Barner scientific poll. But here's the part that was the shock. And I'm glad, I hope people are sitting down for this, but 55%, a majority of Democrats, favor a bill to keep hearts beating, which shows you how far out of step that the Harris and Biden campaign are. They actually want us to fund abortions till birth. And I'll tell you one other thing. That Kamala Harris, when she was running for president, went even beyond. Can you imagine this? She said, I'm going to make sure that any state that passes a pro-life law runs it by my Department of Justice to make sure it complies with the unconstitutional ruling of Roe versus Wade. In other words, she's going to tell people, hey, you can't pass heartbeat and full protection laws anywhere in the state, any state, as long as I'm in charge. This tells you where we are. And I got to tell you something. There are a lot of people who are still hung up on a tweet they heard or something the president did in his past. I gotta say something, that we cannot let unborn children pay for your personality preference with their lives, because that's what we're dealing with. This is not American Idol. This is not Mr. Congeniality beauty pageant. This is policy. And the choice and the policies that will come with this choice is life or death for millions of American children.
You know, Janet, if it's true that the majority of Americans, even Republicans and Democrats, want some type of limitations on abortion, I mean, we know that's true. We know that's true. How in the world have we gotten to a place with all these advances that we're now talking about aborting a baby in a birth canal or something? You hear what I'm saying? I can't even believe, like, the governor of Virginia would even take us to that place, and that we're talking about it nationally as a part of the debates potentially that we're going to see coming up.
It's crazy. You know, I remember back in the 90s, 1994, when I had the privilege to introduce and work toward passage of the nation's first ban on partial birth abortion. And I remember showing the procedure, showing what it was like to legislators, and seeing them break down and cry in front of me. And I remember thinking, well, surely the pro-abortion movement won't go as far as killing a child during the process of delivery. And I was wrong. There is something I've learned in these battles, and that is you can always count on the extremism of the pro-abortion movement. They will stop at nothing. And that's why we saw the governor, as you mentioned, and I wrote about it in my book, the governor of Virginia saying, yeah, and if they make it out alive, if they're born, well, we can then decide whether or not we want to keep them comfortable, whether or not we just want to neglect and let the child die. That is called homicide. And that is the new position of the pro-abortion party. And sadly, it's not so new, but the truth is it's coming out. And this is what I believe. I believe the enemy has overplayed his hand.
Woo! I think you got a little fire in you. Janet Porter, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Coming up next, former professional baseball player, nationally recognized entrepreneur and business owner, best-selling author and activist, David Benham. At the American Association of Christian Counselors, we have launched a massive new initiative on mental health and addiction through the local church. Our goal is to train an army of certified mental health coach first responders in and through the church, through the local church. If you would like to learn how you could become a certified mental health coach, write down this URL. Better yet, go there right now. It's lightuniversity.com/mental health coach. Nearly 7,000 people have enrolled in this program of study over the last few weeks, and nearly 2,000 churches are already engaged in this effort. Learn again how you can become a certified mental health coach, lightuniversity.com/mental health coach. Here's the best news. It's free to churches, and it's tuition free to those students who are enrolling right now. lightuniversity.com/mental health coach. Can't wait to see what God's going to do in and through this new global initiative on mental health and addiction. Joining us now is David Benham. David is a former professional baseball player, nationally recognized entrepreneur, business owner, best-selling author. His rise to success came with his very first company, which grew to 100 offices in 35 states, catapulted him and his brother onto the national stage David is an activist. He's a strong voice in modern day Christianity. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, man, it's awesome to be here with you, Tim.
David, as we get started, you're the kind of guy where you draw a line in the sand and you say, hey, it's time. It's time to stand. It's time to fight. You unashamedly are out there getting after it. I love that about you and your brother. You guys, though, are no stranger to being censored, beat up a little bit over religious liberty issues. Can you tell us a little bit about your story, David, just to orient everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. Just after we left Liberty University, I was drafted by the Red Sox, my brother by the Orioles, a lesser organization than mine, of course. Anyway, we played some minor league baseball. We got out, started a company in Charlotte, North Carolina, applying biblical principles. And that grew very large, very fast. And at the height of our business, TLC and HGTV came to us and both offered us reality show contracts. HGTV ended up winning out. And so we got hired by HGTV, and they knew everything about us. They knew we were strong pro-life, strong pro-marriage. We had taken a stand on those from a business perspective. We saw a lot of politicians and even some pastors standing for these things, but we didn't really see a lot of Christian entrepreneurs and Christian celebrities. We didn't see them standing. So we felt that God had given us success for the very purpose of standing and being a voice for the voiceless. Well, HG was totally fine with it. They, as a matter of fact, said a lot of us believe like you guys do. We just don't talk about it. Then after we started airing commercials and we were 5 weeks into a 10-week film shoot, that's when the activist organizations on the left coast began to circulate, targeting the advertisers. And they went to HG and they said to fire us. And HG fought for us for a while, but eventually they just couldn't stand up to the pressure. And we were we were pretty much one of the first. Part of the cancel culture. You know, we were one of the first targets after Phil Robertson had gotten targeted with A&E, but then he kept his show, but we lost ours. So back before fake news and cancel culture were a thing, we were in the midst of that, and we lost the show, but it didn't matter to us because we've read our Bible enough to know that the Gideons of the world and the Deborahs of the world and the King Davids of the world and the Noahs of the world, those really stood strong during their time, and this is our time to stand strong as well. That turned into a best-selling book called Whatever the Cost. We continue to travel the country. We write books, we travel, we speak, but we're also building businesses. We're creating jobs. We're doing the very thing that the radical left is trying to target. And we're not going to back down because this is what faithful Christianity looks like. And that's kind of our story in a nutshell.
Love it. David, this summer, you down in Charlotte decided to go out and do a little protesting on your own. You certainly, both of you, have your feet planted in the pro-life movement. Tell us what happened. And by the way, were you peaceful? Were you doing social distancing and all those kind of good things?
Of course, we don't protest anything. We proclaim that there is a choice. His name is Jesus. And and by the way, the local church, ma'am, you feel like you have no choice in this, but the local church here in Charlotte is going to help you. We have over 300 churches that are willing to come alongside mothers that choose life, throw them baby showers, go to prenatal visits with them, housing assistance, job support, counseling for their boyfriend or their husband or their father, or whoever it is. We've got holistic life choices here in Charlotte, North Carolina, under the ministry that we helped start called Cities for Life and Love Life Charlotte. Well, when the pandemic broke out, we are an essential organization. We're a federally recognized tax-exempt organization. The abortion clinics in North Carolina were deemed essential, and so the abortion clinics were packed. So we decided, you know what? We have the right to be out here offering these pro-life counseling services. We weren't protesting anything. So what we did was we said, we still want to be above board. Let's pare down to 3 sidewalk counselors. Let's keep them socially distanced, hand sanitizer, the whole 9 yards. And so that's what we chose to do. So while the abortion clinic was packed with people and people going into the waiting room and all these other things, we had 3 socially distanced, peaceful sidewalk counselors out there. And I got a call on a Saturday morning saying, Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department's going to arrest your sidewalk counselors. So I rushed down there. And the minute I get out of my truck, the officer looks at me and says, Mr. Benham, you can't be here. You're leading a protest. I'm like, I ain't leading a protest. What are you talking about? Which, by the way, let me pause. 10 days later was when the first Black Lives Matter protest took place, where they were blowing up the city basically, and thousands of people, no masks and all this other stuff. So this was pre that. And I said, I'm not leading a protest. We have 3 sidewalk counselors. We've got a mobile ultrasound unit with an RV or with a sonogram technician on it, and everybody's socially distanced. You can't tell me to leave. And they said, no, we're asking you to leave or we're going to arrest you. And it was at that moment, Tim, that I had to draw a line in my heart. And I said, no, I am not going to get bullied by these people. And so they ended up arresting me. I'd never been arrested before a day in my life. They arrested me. And unfortunately for them, we sued them and they will not back off. City of Charlotte right now, I can't go too deep into the details, but they're not going to back off. They're not going to drop the charges. They unlawfully arrested me and unlawfully imprisoned me. And so they won't back off, but neither are we, for the sake of our children and our children's children and the rights that we have in this country. So we are going to stand for the unborn, and we are also going to stand for our rights that we have as peaceful American citizens, that we can engage in these life-affirming services while abortion clinics remain open as essential businesses inside this pandemic.
Dave, it's just insane what we're seeing on television, what's going on in our country. Man, if somebody doesn't step up, if somebody doesn't step into these moments, what in the world's going to happen? I do think this, and I think people are sick of it. They're tired of all this craziness going on. Are you encouraged in your heart? You're traveling around the country still. I mean, are you encouraged?
I am, because there's a remnant of Americans, there's a remnant of believers inside the church that are saying enough is enough. We are going to step forward, speak the truth in love, and we do three things. And this is a book of Daniel that my brother and I wrote about called Living Among Lions. Number one, you got to draw the line in your heart. Hey, look, I'm a believer. I love freedom. I'm going to stand for it. Number two, you got to let it be known. You got to enter the conversation. Don't run away from speaking truth in love. And number three, keep your windows open like Daniel did in Babylon. When the ordinances targeted him, he didn't change who he was. He kept his windows open, kept praying with his windows open toward Jerusalem. And that's an ancient example that we can have today in our modern day version of Christianity and our modern day as American citizens, our citizenship, that we can stand strong.
David, I'm sitting here thinking, good night. This topic was an issue where we all had learned that pro-life movement was making gains. We're getting to a place where the overwhelming majority of Americans, Republicans and Democrats, want some type of limitations on abortion. People want to deal with this issue. Now the conversation is going to a place where we're talking about abortion, basically right up to the birth canal and more. David, can you believe we've gone there? Why do you think? Yeah. Why do you think the modern day insanity is pushing and sort of cascading off the cliff, if you will, when it comes to abortion?
Well, I'll tell you, from a spiritual perspective, the enemy is filled with fury because he knows that his time is short. So that's the principalities, rulers, and authorities of darkness. They rob, kill, and destroy. Now, on the natural side of things, there are two types of people in this movement. There are the enslaved and the enslavers. In other words, those that are enslaved to this, they feel that abortion is their only choice. They feel that abortion is the right thing. But then there's the enslavers, and this is the media, this is the academic elites, this is the political elites. They're enslaving, especially African-American communities. That's the target of Planned Parenthood. They are enslaving them. They have no idea that those people, those leaders, are serving a spirit they know nothing of. But it is up to us to step in and speak the truth, speak it in love, and then to offer life-affirming help to these mothers, true choices, holistic choices to these mothers, and then to plug them into the local church that is ready to serve them. I truly believe, Tim, that just like when Chuck Yeager, who was the fighter pilot who broke the sound barrier the first time, and he describes that story, and he says, just before I broke through, it felt like the entire plane was going to come apart. It felt like the bolts were just going to explode. There was so much violence, shaking. And then he said, and then all of a sudden, boom, I broke through and there was a supernatural peace. And I believe we're on the verge of a breakthrough. Either Jesus is coming back or we're going to have a revival and an awakening that is really going to heal this nation. And that's what we're praying for. So whether Jesus comes back or whether there's an awakening, I am going to stand, and I know you will too.
Hey, if people want to learn more about your ministry, maybe even support you guys, what can they do real quick?
Lovelife.org. Go there. You'll see everything you need to know. Lovelife.org.
David Benham, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, man.
Coming up next, president of Choose Grace International, an expert on post-abortion trauma, Kaylin Carlson.
Our God, He reigns forever. Our hope, our strong deliverer. Our God, He reigns everlasting kind.
Joining us now is president and founder of Choose Grace International, Kaylin Carlson. She's a nationally recognized counselor with extensive experience in post-abortion care. She is the Reproductive Loss and Sexual Trauma Network leader for the American Association of Christian Counselors. She's also a host of the upcoming Summit of Grace event. Kaylin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's very nice to be here today.
Kaylin, as we get started, everybody knows that since Roe versus Wade, way back in 1973, there's been about 60 plus million abortions in our country. That's about 1.5 million annually. If the stats are true, Guttmacher Institute and others estimate about 40% of American women under the age of 45 have had an abortion. When we do programs and talk about abortion, it concerns me because I feel like there are a lot of people watching the program who are post-abortive, and a lot of them haven't dealt with the pain or the journey they've been on. Maybe it's like a beach ball they're trying to hold underwater. And so I'm so honored and glad that you decided to join us because you're the expert in that area. Let's just get started, Kaylin. You started a ministry called Choose Grace International. Can you tell us why and how it got started?
Sure. Well, thank you for asking. So when I was 17, I had an unplanned pregnancy and I had an abortion. And, I dealt with trauma, it was traumatizing and, to the point where I really wanted to die. And it was through recovery that I was able to, recovery and healing, that I was able to finally choose grace. And what that looked like was, when I hit, it was just an experience where, a spiritual experience really, where I felt God saying, look, you can either choose a life full of shame, regret, and despair, or you can choose my grace, which is sufficient for you. So what do you choose this day? Do you choose pain and suffering, or do you choose my grace, my sweet, precious daughter? And I just reached up and I said, I choose your grace. And if you notice our logo, it's the hands reaching up. God reaches down his right hand, and we just need to reach up and grab it and say, I choose your grace. And so that's how the ministry name came about, was to choose grace.
Kaylin, it's amazing. I often have thought that the sleeping giant in the church are post-abortive women who've been there, who understand this journey, who can step into the life of a young woman or a couple who are struggling. And I've learned that usually a decision to abort is made in like a 24-hour window. Who better than those who have been down this road, maybe who felt a lot of guilt and maybe shame as a result of it. Maybe they haven't worked through forgiveness and so much more. But boy, if they could, Kaylin, what an amazing army that could and would be. I believe that with all my heart, don't you?
Well, I believe that, women, when we talk about numbers, how many abortions there's been, those are numbers, yes, but they've also got a story and they've also got a heart. And so many times that heart isn't listened to, and that heart needs healing. And, when you listen to the heart and when you help the heart, you help the whole person. And I think, Dr. Clinton, it's more too about connecting people because, so many times there's so much shame and isolation, and you fear, oh, what are they going to think of me? Because you already have that self-loathing and self-hatred, and you are just feeling so down about yourself. And I think what's really important is, and that's what we're going to be trying to do with the Summit of Grace, what's really important is to make those connections so you feel empowered. Women need empowerment. And so many times we hear, abortion did not empower me. So they're looking for an empowerment. And that's what I want to, my mission is to help heal the hearts of men and women. And so they feel empowered and have a sense of purpose for their lives.
Kaylin, a concept that you and I have talked a little bit about is the issue of moral injury. and how significant it is here on this healing journey piece, which is critical. Can you address it real quick?
Oh, yes. So Jonathan Shea coined a term called moral injury, and it's for the work with combat veterans. And I see a strong parallel between moral injury and abortion. And so we are, I've interviewed Dr. Harold Koenig, I talked to him, and whenever I've shared this parallel, the moral injury piece talks about the moral side, your moral conscience. We look at the conscience. So many times we don't research the moral values. And a lot of times when we hear this talk, well, morals aside, and then they talk about abortion. Well, we can't just say morals aside, because that's part of our core. That's who we are. That's our conscience. And our conscience has a way of not letting things go that are really important in our lives, of situations that happen, with the memories that still exist after an abortion. So, it's kind of like when we take the PTSD that a lot of times we see in abortion. I mean, for some, just like a combat veteran might suffer from PTSD. And also then there's a moral injury piece. And so the two together help make up the whole, and to help understand, in our whole body, mind, soul, spirit, how abortion can negatively affect us, just like combat veterans.
Caitlin, I remember in a counseling session early on in my career, I was working with this lady, and she kept saying at the end of a number of sessions, Tim, if I tell you this secret, you're not going to like me anymore. And I would just look at her perplexed, and I remember she would get up and leave. And I said, walking out the door, you can trust me. And I remember her coming back the next week, same thing. If I tell you the secret, you won't like me anymore. I'd say, you can trust me. And I remember when she finally told me about what happened in her life. She chose abortion. She said, Tim, I wake up every night hearing babies scream. And I asked her, I said, have you asked God for forgiveness? She said, Tim, I have asked him so many times. I mean, I can't even tell you. And I said, you know what? And in a moment, Caitlin, I'll never forget it. I looked at her and said, then I believe he forgives you. And she sat there and wept. I mean, the tears just flowed down her face. She said, Tim, do you really believe that's true? And I said, he forgives you. There's therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Jesus Christ. When we confess our sins, he's faithful and just to forgive us of all of our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Caitlin, I want you to close us out with this piece. In this life, we're not to be overcome with evil, but we're to overcome evil with good. And when you journey, and like you're saying, and deal with moral injury, and you begin to work your way through the guilt and the shame, and then owning and seeing that God holds your baby now and more, there's a freedom that comes with it, and it's a gift. And now my responsibility is, hey, go and sin no more, right? And then overcome evil with good. Do something about it. Caitlin, can you bring us home? Can you tell us what God's done in your life and in the lives of a lot of women you serve?
I think to wrap it up is to say perfect love casts out fear, because abortion is so fear-based. And if it's rooted in fear, you're going to have an abortion. But when it's rooted in love, unconditional love, grace, and compassion, it can do a whole lot. And so from my learning, I think that is the big takeaway, that perfect love casts out fear. And if we can get the fear removed, then I think we can help prevent a lot of people from suffering moral injury and spiritual wounds.
Wonderful. Caitlin Carlson, Choose Grace International, Choose Grace Summit coming up. Hey, thank you for joining us.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Coming up next, Battle Cry podcaster, my son Zach Clinton, with a special guest, Victoria Robinson.
I see myself, but it's hard for me to see when held you on the cross, when you could have walked away and say what you've done, and I just have to say, when held you on the cross, there's more than just an nails. With all the pain and suffering
Joining us today is renowned author, public speaker, television personality, and former host of the radio show Real Talk, Victoria Robinson. Victoria has been a highly regarded voice in the pro-life movement for over 2 decades now and currently serves as the Director of External Relations for the Save the Storks ministry. Victoria, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Zach. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Miss Victoria, we're talking about a very crucial topic today, and that being of abortion and the pro-life movement. And I know you have a very personal and moving story. So can you just tell us a little bit about that story?
Sure. It's hard to tell it in just a couple minutes, but the Reader's Digest version basically is that unfortunately over 34 years ago, I chose abortion, about almost 34 years ago now. And I was a single mother with 2 little girls, struggling to make ends meet because their father had just abandoned us and left me alone to take care of them in every way, financially and emotionally. He just left. And so I met a guy about 9 months after my husband left, and I fell madly in love. And when a woman's in a position where she feels so vulnerable and her self-esteem is shot like mine was, it's easy to cling to the first guy who says everything that she wants to hear. And unfortunately, another 9 months later, I was pregnant. And even though I knew the outcome of a pregnancy, I was terrified. And I was really disappointed in myself because I was already struggling. And now here I was, a single mom with 2 girls I could hardly take care of financially. And now I was pregnant again. My boyfriend said the best thing he thought for us to do was abortion. And I allowed him and the abortion clinic worker to convince me that was the best choice. And as soon as I walked out of that abortion clinic, I knew that I had just made the biggest mistake of my life.
Victoria, you now, and coming through that whole process and your whole story, are really a big advocate for this pro-life movement. And I was wondering, when you're seeing a lot of women that are coming in and out of this stage of life, are you seeing that they're really using coming out of this abortion and using it as a platform to maybe speak into the pro-life movement, as like yourself, really being a source of light in a dark world?
Actually, Zach, I wish that were true, but it is not true. Most women, the majority of men and women who have an abortion in their past, don't want to talk about it. And it's their secret. It's their great secret. So there aren't a lot of people like me who are talking publicly about having an abortion. I do think that people like me, the more we speak, it helps people have more courage to talk about it, but it may not be on a public platform, but maybe to someone they work with or one of their children that's contemplating an abortion, if they have a teenager that finds themselves in an unplanned pregnancy. But it's just a shame. There's a shame that follows having an abortion and the guilt that tends to keep you from telling anybody about it until you go through some healing, and then it's a little bit easier. But not everybody is going to be speaking in front of people like I do. It was something God called me to do.
Absolutely. And now you're plugged into the Save the Storks ministry. Can you just share a little bit about that ministry? But also, I've heard that you guys really try to show women an ultrasound of their baby. And can you speak into maybe why you do that and what are the benefits of it?
I think the ultrasound is the greatest window into the womb, Zach, and one of the best gifts the pro-life movement's ever been given. When you see a baby in an ultrasound, and you can see that heartbeat as early as 6 weeks and arms and legs forming, it's hard to deny that that's a living human being inside that's growing. So on a Save the Storks bus, our affiliates are parking them in front of abortion clinics, offering women free ultrasound so they can make that heart connection to their child. And 4 out of 5 women who come on a Stork bus are choosing life when they see their babies.
Amen. Hallelujah to that. That's truly amazing, Victoria. It really is. And we just appreciate you and your voice and your platform. And just in closing here, there's a lot of women out there who maybe, like you are saying earlier, that are experiencing that shame and that guilt, and they maybe haven't really fully forgiven themselves in making that decision to choose an abortion. So can you just give a motivating or an encouraging word to those women in this moment?
Yes, and when you say women, I want to make sure and we add men as well, because these babies have fathers too. And I think we forget that men are hurting from abortion as well. But what I would encourage you to do if you've had an abortion in your past is seek out your pregnancy resource center in your community. The majority of them offer post-abortion counseling, but if they don't, they'll be able to help you and direct you to getting help. Get in touch with me, Victoria at Save the Storks, and I will help you find some counseling in your area. There is life after abortion. And if you're listening and that is you, I promise you, if you'll reach out to me, I will do everything I can to help you get the help that you need.
Victoria is a true testament that there is life after abortion. Victoria Robinson, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Zach. Say hello to your dad.
Yes, ma'am.
Mental health will be one of, if not the greatest challenge facing the church as we go forward. Early on in the pandemic, everybody started posting verses up on social media, texting one another, and they're encouraging. But when you continue to wrestle with fear and anxiety, you begin to question yourself. There's a lot of reasons to be fearful of the COVID-19 virus.
The greatest need for faith is when you're afraid. What we do understand about the scripture is that there has to be a steady diet, that you can focus your attention on specific scriptures, anchors. I mean, when you're in a storm, it is important to cry out to God.
You know, in closing, our prayer is that today's program has ministered to you, certainly helped you understand this issue of abortion and the pro-life movement better. But let me also say this as a counselor. If you or someone you love, if you're struggling right now, let me encourage you to call your local crisis pregnancy hotline. Or even better, you could visit our friends at care-net.org. May God lead you and bless you. And let's all stand together for life.